Based on a true story, a woman seeks a fresh start from her stagnant marriage when intruders invade their home, igniting a new chapter in the couple's life. Unable to flee through the window, she concocts a plan, pouring bleach into a bucket. When the door finally opens, she splashes it on the intruder. Reflecting on past conversations, Beth recalls a chat with her co-worker, Allie, who had noticed her disinterest in a vacation brochure gifted by her husband for their anniversary. Allie, suggesting it might be time for them to have children, shares her own excitement about starting a family. Beth confesses her lack of intimacy with her husband since his return from military service, prompting concern from Allie about potential infidelity. However, Beth dismisses this notion, shifting the topic to Allie's impending appointment for starting a family. In a separate encounter, Beth finds herself in an uncomfortable situation with two customers, Doug and JB, who behave inappropriately towards her. With quick thinking, Beth manages the situation until Officer Walt Armentrout intervenes. With backup, Beth stands her ground as Officer Armentrout confronts the thugs, threatening to run a background check if they don't leave. Despite GB's mocking, they eventually retreat. Meanwhile, Beth's husband, Officer Pete, is on duty observing vultures scavenging a carcass. When Walt contacts Pete over the radio, he mentions having coffee at B's diner and reassures Pete that everything is fine, even extending anniversary greetings, noting Beth's apparent affection. Later, as Beth prepares to leave, Doug and GB's truck briefly blocks her path before driving off, causing her some unease. Despite her apprehension, she continues home. However, upon arrival, she discovers the water supply is cut off and the well is dry. Pete later arrives with a gift, concealing it before warmly greeting Beth, who is dressed up for dinner. Before heading upstairs, Beth reminds Pete to secure his gun, which he does reluctantly. Despite his attempts at affection, Beth is left disappointed by a mere peck on the cheek. Elsewhere, Doug and JB pass the time in their truck, discussing stars and luck, though JB remains pessimistic. When Walt arrives and questions them about their presence near the Walker household, tensions escalate. Walt, refusing to give them the benefit of the doubt, draws his weapon and orders them out of the vehicle. With force, Walt struck their legs with his club, compelling them to retreat to their truck. As they drove away, seemingly leaving, the truck abruptly spun around, running over Walt in the Walker household driveway. Meanwhile, Beth prepared a delightful dinner for Pete, who, before sitting at the table, switched on the police scanner. The next morning, Pete awoke to find Beth missing. As he searched for her, he encountered her near a fire pit outside before she abruptly vanished. Startled, Pete snapped out of the dream, finding himself alone in their quiet home. Concerned, he noticed a truck arriving and questioned Beth about it. As Pete went to investigate, Beth observed the thug's vehicle downstairs. Pete returned, informing Beth of an accident involving a police officer down the road, prompting them to call for assistance. Pete directed Beth to call for help, keep the door locked, and secure his gun. Meanwhile, he decided to accompany the men to investigate the accident. Upon reaching Walt, who was injured at the accident scene, Doug aimed his gun at the officer but hesitated when Pete pointed out that Walt was still alive. They assisted Walt into the truck, realizing Doug's gun was missing from the house. Meanwhile, Beth remained inside as JB offered an apology for the diner incident and asked for a drink. Beth cautiously handed him a soda through the door. As JB commented on their home security and complained about mosquitoes, Beth, feeling pity, invited him inside. JB observed Pete's military commendations as they heard the truck arriving. The men carried Walt inside, and Pete asked for space once alone with Beth. Unbeknownst to Beth and Pete, the intruders argued over Pete's survival and the lost gun. Pete called Doug to join them upstairs. During dinner, tensions escalated as Doug grabbed a knife, prompting a struggle between him and Pete. Despite Pete's efforts, Doug managed to injure him before JB intervened, allowing Doug to overpower Pete, who eventually lost consciousness. Frozen in fear, Beth watched as Doug and JB tended to her unconscious husband. Realizing Pete was dead, Beth grabbed the knife and raced upstairs with Doug in pursuit. In her bedroom, a confrontation ensued, but Doug unexpectedly chose to lay on the bed, prompting Beth to drop the knife, leading to an intimate encounter between them. Meanwhile, JB noticed Walt's gun and used it to subdue the officer. He revealed to Walt that Beth and Doug were former lovers and that they were merely collateral. After a conversation about the complexities of love, JB suffocated Walt with a pillow. After their intimate encounter, Doug noticed a lottery ticket and questioned Beth about it. Beth explained it was a backup plan in case things went wrong. Walt's death wasn't part of their plan, so Beth suggested concealing his body in the well. She proposed living as the surviving widow to avoid suspicion, but insisted on appearing as a victim. As Beth awaited their plan's execution, Doug struck her downstairs to maintain her facade as a victim. Meanwhile, Allie arrived and JB welcomed her, posing as Beth's cousin. Allie, suspicious of JB's demeanor, attempted to leave, but JB instructed her to leave the sonogram on the dining table instead. After bidding farewell to Ally, Beth assured her friend of her safety. Descending the stairs, Doug suggested they cut their losses, but JB insisted on sticking to the plan. JB proposed eliminating both Pete and Beth, inciting Doug's anger at the suggestion of harming Beth. Their argument was interrupted by motion-activated lights, signaling Pete's presence outside. Upon Beth's return, she confronted JB for endangering her friend, but a sonic alarm blared, deafening them momentarily. Frantically, Beth struggled to disable the alarm, fearing police intervention. With Doug's help, Beth managed to silence the alarm. Rushing to the safe, Beth discovered it was empty, heightening her anxiety. Switching on the police scanner, they heard Pete's call for backup. As Doug and JB went outside to investigate, they found Beth's car empty. JB cut the radio communication while Doug raised his hands in surrender, attempting to negotiate with Pete. Unaware of Beth's betrayal, Pete grew increasingly concerned. As JB retreated to the house, Pete shot him in the ear with his accomplice hiding behind the truck. Doug rushed back to the house, promising to seek help. Inside, Doug urgently informed Beth of his need for a gun. Guiding him to a locked closet under the stairs, Beth watched as Doug broke in, tossing out Pete's gift, a folder and some letters. Among the items, Beth discovered a half-burned picture of herself and Doug, revealing Pete's knowledge of their relationship. Realizing their plan was compromised, Beth urged Doug to leave, suspecting Pete had removed her from his insurance policy and pension. Meanwhile, Pete stumbled into the shed, retrieving a first aid kit to tend to his wound. Seizing the opportunity, JB attempted to shoot Pete, but Pete countered, subduing his attacker. Beth, searching for Pete outside, stumbled upon JB's lifeless body before Pete grabbed her from behind. Seizing the moment, Beth fabricated a story of Doug assaulting her but claimed she fought back. Leading Pete back to the house, Beth insisted everyone was dead, arousing Pete's suspicion when no emergency services arrived. Beth then fabricated killing Doug, urging Pete to lower his gun, but Pete remained resolute. As Pete confronted Beth, Doug attempted to ambush Pete, but Beth's subtle cue alerted Pete, allowing him to shoot Doug. Discovering a photo booth picture in Doug's wallet, Pete realized the extent of Beth's betrayal. In a frantic struggle, Beth managed to slip past Pete, locking herself in the bathroom. Armed with a small blade, she awaited Pete's approach while Pete recalled discovering the incriminating photo. Breaking down the bathroom door, Pete was met with bleach to the face from Beth, blinding him temporarily. Seizing the opportunity, Beth retrieved the gun downstairs, engaging in a dangerous chase with Pete. Ultimately, Beth, recognizing her desire for freedom, attempted to run Pete over with Doug's truck, but crashed into the well instead. Bruised but determined, she confronted Pete, demanding answers about his indifference to her secret relationship. Amidst her emotional outbursts, Beth lamented marrying Pete for a fresh start, only to find herself trapped in a stifling existence. When Pete returns, he reassures Beth that he can still fix things, but she rejects his words, expressing her desire for something more than him in their current life. As Pete attempts to retrieve the gun from her, Beth steps back and accidentally falls into the well. Despite Pete managing to grab her arm, Beth, realizing that her pursuit of a new life has led to nothing, grabs her hidden blade and stabs Pete's arm, forcing him to release her. As a result, Beth plummets down the well, shattered by the events. Grieving and alone, Pete sits on the deck, awaiting help. Unbeknownst to him, Beth, the scorned wife, awakens at the bottom of the well, ironically granted the new life she had longed for. Subscribe to watch more videos like this, turn on notifications, and leave a like to help the channel out. Thank you for watching.